Do I regret the fact that he has quite obviously conducted himself in a manner unbecoming?
King Charles finally started the process of removing his brother's remaining royal titles and filed legal notice on October 30th, directing Andrew to turn over the lease to Royal Lodge. This sudden and unusual decision has shocked the British. Monarchy, indeed unworthy, he had committed sexual offenses. Yes. The broad ruling is the result of years of controversy and growing pressure on the palace to act decisively against Prince Andrew, Duke of York. As the second son of Queen Elizabeth II, he shall henceforth be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, losing the princely titles he has possessed since birth. However, the consequences go beyond Andrew. After living in the expansive house with her ex-husband for more than 20 years, Sarah Ferguson will be leaving Royal Lodge. This will be the end of an era for the divorced pair. The announcement from the palace was clear-cut and uncompromising. In a statement that echoed throughout the world, Buckingham Palace stated that His Majesty has today started a legal process to remove Prince Andrew's style, titles, and honors. In addition to forcing Ferguson and Andrew to leave their long-term residence, the mansion in the middle of the storm, the ruling essentially terminates Andrew's royal position. Royal Lodge is not your typical home. The current edifice, which dates from the 19th century and was enlarged in the 1930s for the then Duke of York and future King George VI, is one of several buildings that have been on the site since the 17th century. There are roughly 30 rooms, including 7 beds, in its core component, which is made up of 2 wings and 3 levels. The royal family has strong emotional ties to the site. The little house is located on the grounds of Royal Lodge, which the Duke and Duchess of York moved into about 1932 with their young family, which included Princess Elizabeth, who would later become Queen Elizabeth II. The future queen spent a large portion of her youth at the estate. Boothbach, a 1932 gift from the Welsh people to Princess Elizabeth when she was a young girl. Until her death in 2002, the Queen Mother used the house as one of her country retreats as a place of grace and favor following the death of King George V. With Queen Elizabeth II at her side, the cherished Queen Mother passed away at Royal Lodge. In 2003, Andrew paid $1 million for the property when his grandma passed away. Additionally, he was required to pay for any renovations and upkeep of the surrounding grounds under the conditions of the 75-year lease, which was set to end on June 15, 2078. According to reports, he spent £7.5 million remodeling the 30-room Georgian home in Windsor, adding new features like an indoor swimming pool. After leaving Sunninghill Park, Andrew and his 2 daughters moved into the house in 2004. Sarah Ferguson, his ex-wife, came into Royal Lodge in 2008 and resumed living with Andrew. The couple continued to live together in the Grand Windsor home for almost 20 years after their 1996 divorce. The friendship that ruined a prince was the Epstein scandal. Andrew's relationship with American businessman and convicted criminal Jeffrey Epstein is the primary cause of his demise. It would take years for the entire scope of the scandal to surface and for the royal family to act. But BBC News reported in March 2011 that Andrew's association with Jeffrey Epstein was generating a constant barrage of criticism. According to Andrew, Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's lover and later convicted adult trafficker, introduced him to Epstein in 1999. The relationship that ensued would ultimately cost Andrew everything. In 2000, Queen Elizabeth II threw a party at Windsor Castle to celebrate Prince Andrew's 40th birthday, and Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell attended, showing how much Epstein had grown to be a part of Andrew's life. The accusations made against Andrew are grave and extremely unsettling. Virginia Giuffre claimed in 2014 that she was trafficked by Epstein at the age of 17 and coerced into 3 intimate acts with Prince Andrew. The first incident is said to have happened in March 2001 in Maxwell's mansion in London. The other occasions, she said, took place at Epstein's private Caribbean island and his New York mansion. Additionally, she reiterated that the third encounter was an adult sex on Epstein's island with the financier and around 8 other girls who didn't really speak English and seemed younger than 18. With Andrew reportedly taking part in the very actions that would ultimately land Epstein in jail, the accusations formed a picture of systemic abuse and exploitation. The awful BBC interview, one of the worst PR blunders in royal history, resulted from Andrew's endeavor to clear his name. Andrew publicly described his interactions with Epstein in an interview with Emily Maitlis that was arranged by the BBC's Newsnight in November 2019. Yes, There was definitely no celebration. In 2010, the interview was televised on November 16th after being recorded in Buckingham Palace on November 14th. The purpose of the interview was to allay criticism and give Andrew a chance to present his version of events. Rather, it turned into a lesson on what not to say. Andrew claimed he had no memory of ever meeting Quay and that he was at Pizza Express with his daughter Beatrice in March 2001. Therefore, he was unable to engage in any sexual activity with her. Andrew's seeming lack of compassion for Epstein's victims was maybe the most harmful. The public responded quickly and harshly to Andrew's statement that he did not regret his association with Epstein, saying that by the people that I met and the opportunities that I was given to learn, either by him or because of him, were actually very useful. The Guardian wrote, "It was an exchange that summed up a grotesque mismatch between the Duke of York's language and demeanor and the gravity of the allegations that continue to surround him." On November 20th, 2019, a statement from Buckingham Palace announced that Andrew was suspending his public duties for the foreseeable future. Hannah Bardell, the MP for Livingston at the time, described the interview as disgusting, saying, "Prince Andrew literally has no remorse or regard for the women mistreated, and clearly does not see the problem with being friends with Epstein." The prince, who used to frequently attend royal functions and represent the Queen both domestically and internationally, was essentially ignored. The complex role of Sarah Ferguson. The situation is further complicated by Sarah Ferguson's role in the Epstein incident. Ferguson said in March 2011 that Epstein had given Johnny O'Sullivan, her former personal assistant, $15,000. Ferguson was having serious financial problems at the time of the payment. In an interview with the Evening Standard, Ferguson stated, "I personally, on behalf of myself, deeply regret that Jeffrey Epstein became involved in any way with me. He abhorred pedophilia and any type of mistreatment against children, and know that this was a gigantic error of judgment on my behalf." However, revelations in 2025 revealed that Ferguson's relationship with Epstein may have been more complicated than first thought. Ferguson has remained faithful to her ex-husband throughout the scandal. Sarah told The Times in 2021, Sarah, 66, sidestepped the topic on the reports between the brothers during an interview on Good Morning Britain in 2024, saying, "I'm a guest for a start. I wouldn't call it my home, as that would be presumptuous. I am a really fortunate and comfortable visitor. I tend not to get involved in brothers' discussions, and I think that's the safest place to be." The final revelations were emails that changed everything. For years, Andrew maintained that he had severed all ties with Epstein after December 2010. This claim became increasingly difficult to sustain as new evidence emerged. In January 2025, Bloomberg News obtained a legal filing showing that Epstein had been in contact with Andrew, at least through email, until February 2011. The filing reportedly showed emails where the two discussed press reports, and Andrew wrote they should keep in close touch and will play some more soon. Earlier this month, British media reported on that exchange, which came after a 2001 photo of him and a young Jouet at the London townhouse of Epstein's then-girlfriend Ghislaine Maxwell was published. The email was sent at a time of heightened media coverage of the Epstein scandal, with Andrew telling Epstein they were in this together and would have to rise above it. The revelation that Andrew had lied about the extent and duration of his relationship with Epstein proved to be the breaking point. It demonstrated a pattern of deception that the palace could no longer ignore or excuse. The legal battle and settlement. In 2021, Virginia Jew filed a lawsuit against Andrew, alleging he violated her when she was a teenager. The lawsuit put the royal family in an impossible position. If Andrew fought the case and lost, the damage would be catastrophic. If he settled, it would be seen as an admission of guilt, despite legal disclaimers. Andrew reached an out-of-court settlement with Jeffrey in 2022, after she filed a civil suit against him in New York. While he didn't admit wrongdoing, Andrew did acknowledge Jur's suffering as a victim of adult trafficking. The settlement was reported to be in the millions, though the exact amount was never disclosed publicly. In January 2022, Queen Elizabeth II removed Andrew's military affiliations and royal patronages and confirmed that he would no longer use the style His Royal Highness in any official capacity. The late Queen, Andrew's mother, was forced to take action against her own son to protect the institution of the monarchy, the posthumous memoir that sealed Andrew's fate. In October 2025, Virginia Joffrey's memoir, Nobody's Girl, was published, reigniting the scandal with visceral new details. Nobody's Girl detailed 3 alleged intimate encounters with Andrew, who she said acted as if he believed having intimate acts with me was his birthright. The memoir's publication coincided with increased scrutiny of Andrew's finances, and his continued residence at Royal Lodge. The Times newspaper reported on October 21st that he had not paid rent on his 30-room mansion known as Royal Lodge for 2 decades. It was revealed that he had a lease on the property stipulating a peppercorn rent in return for carrying out renovations and maintaining the mansion. Andrew was paying a rent of 1 peppercorn each year. The arrangement came under intense criticism from politicians and the public alike, who questioned why a disgraced royal should continue to live in luxury at minimal cost, while his association with a convicted violator remained unresolved. King Charles makes his move. For King Charles, the decision to strip his brother of titles and evict him from the Royal Lodge was undoubtedly painful, but increasingly necessary. Andrew's behavior put King Charles in a difficult position. Effectively banish his brother as a royal outcast, or allow the steady drumbeat of negative headlines to risk further reputational damage to the institution. His lease on Royal Lodge has to date provided him with legal protection to continue in residence. The palace continued formal notice has now been served to surrender the lease, and he will move to alternative private accommodation. The statement was carefully worded but unambiguous in its message. The palace added that the censures are deemed necessary notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations against him. In other words, whether Andrew accepted the allegations or not was irrelevant. The damage to the monarchy was too severe to allow the status quo to continue. Where will they go? The uncertain future of Andrew and Fergie. Andrew is expected to relocate to a property on the Sandringham estate, with any future accommodation privately funded by the king. Sandringham, the royal family's private estate in Norfolk, has long been used as a retreat away from public scrutiny. Sandringham is expected to keep him out of the public eye and in a form of exile. But Sarah Ferguson will not be joining him there. A palace source said it's unlikely Ferguson will relocate to Sandringham, where Andrew is expected to live after leaving Royal Lodge. Sources close to Ferguson emphasized her determination to forge her own path. Contrary to reports, she has never asked for a property or any provision for herself. The source added, she will continue to forge an independent life. Another insider close to Ferguson echoed similar sentiments, saying she is focused on starting a new chapter on her own terms. She's going to move forward independently. The split marks a significant shift in the couple's living arrangement. Despite divorcing in 1996, Andrew and Ferguson had maintained a remarkably close relationship, essentially functioning as a family unit while living under the same roof at Royal Lodge. Their daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, grew up in the mansion, and both continued to visit regularly with their own families. Ferguson's decision to live separately from Andrew suggests a recognition that her association with him has become untenable. While she has stood by him throughout the scandal, the final stripping of his titles and the eviction from Royal Lodge may have been the catalyst for her to reassess her own position. The financial reality. Andrew's financial situation is precarious. As Andrew currently has no source of income, King Charles will be providing an undisclosed private provision for him. The former Duke of York has not been a full-time working royal since 2019, when he stepped back from duties after backlash from his 2019 Newsnight interview about Epstein. For years, speculation swirled about how Andrew was funding his lavish lifestyle and the expensive upkeep of Royal Lodge. In 2023, reports suggested that King Charles III was to cut Andrew's annual grant, potentially leaving him unable to afford the lodge's running costs. The mansion requires significant maintenance, and its running costs are substantial. Sarah Ferguson, as a private citizen, will need to make her own financial arrangements. She has built a career as an author, particularly of children's books, and has various business ventures. However, the question remains whether these will provide sufficient income to maintain the lifestyle she has grown accustomed to at Royal Lodge. Public and political reaction. The public reaction to King Charles's decision has been largely supportive, with many feeling that action should have been taken sooner. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Genrich told the BBC Radio 4 Today program, "It's about time. Prince Andrew took himself off to live in private and make his own way in life. He has disgraced himself. He has embarrassed the royal family time and again. I don't see why the taxpayer, frankly, should continue to foot the bill at all." The publicist's sick of him. When asked if Andrew should leave Royal Lodge, Genrich said, "I don't think the taxpayer in any way should be footing the bill for him to live in luxury homes ever. Again, the sentiment reflects a broader frustration with the royal family's handling of the scandal and a desire to see meaningful consequences for Andrew's actions. Anti-monarchy groups have been particularly vocal. Activists from the anti-monarchy group Republic staged a protest at the entrance to Windsor Great Park in Royal Lodge to cover up, demanding that Andrew face justice and that the royal family be held accountable for harboring him. The broader implications for the monarchy. King Charles's decision to strip Andrew of his titles and evict him from the Royal Lodge represents a watershed moment for the British monarchy. It signals a willingness to prioritize the institution over family loyalty, a balance that has often proved difficult for the royals. Andrew, who was born the second youngest child of Queen Elizabeth II in 1960, was once widely described as her favorite son. The transformation from favored prince to royal outcast is complete and irreversible. The man who served in the Falklands War as a helicopter pilot, who represented the Queen at countless engagements, and who was once seen as a charming, if sometimes controversial, member of the family is now permanently exiled from royal life. For Sarah Ferguson, the situation is equally dramatic. The two remained close after their 1996 divorce, and Ferguson joined the former prince at Royal Lodge 5 years after he moved into the 30-room mansion in 2003. Their unconventional arrangement had become a source of fascination for royal watchers, with many admiring their ability to maintain a family unit despite their divorce. Now that chapter is closing. Ferguson's determination to forge an independent life suggests a recognition that her association with Andrew, while personally meaningful, has become professionally and socially damaging. As a public figure in her own right, with her own career and reputation to consider, the decision to live separately makes pragmatic sense. The historical context. Royal Lodge has witnessed some of the most significant moments in modern British royal history. On the 11th of December 1936, the Duke of Windsor took leave of his family at Royal Lodge following his abdication speech before leaving for overseas and exile. The parallel between that abdication crisis and Andrew's current situation is striking. Both involved a royal choosing personal relationships over duty. Both resulted in exile, and both fundamentally challenged the monarchy's place in British society. The property itself is a testament to the continuity of the royal family. Herbert James Gunn's 1950 painting conversation piece at the Royal Lodge. Windsor depicted King George V and Queen Elizabeth and their daughters, Princesses Elizabeth, later Queen Elizabeth I, and Margaret, at Royal Lodge. That idealized image of royal family life stands in stark contrast to the scandal and disgrace that has now forced Andrew's departure. The Epstein legacy. The broader Epstein scandal continues to reverberate. Epstein died by suicide in a New York City jail in 2019 while awaiting trial. His death ensured that many questions about his operation and his high-profile connections would never be fully answered. Ghislaine Maxwell, his longtime associate, was convicted in 2021 and is currently serving a 20-year prison sentence. Andrew remains one of the most prominent figures associated with Epstein, who has not faced criminal charges. While he settled Jew's civil lawsuit, he has never been charged with any crime related to the allegations against him. He continues to deny all wrongdoing. The U.S. government holds the key to the larger scope of the Jeffrey Epstein case. Advocates have said Prince Andrew may be just one of those people that are implicated. And I do believe if he's willing to come forward now and cooperate, it will lead to the larger scope of what's really gone on here, because there are so many people that need to be held accountable. What happens to Royal Lodge? With Andrew's eviction, questions arise about the future of Royal Lodge itself. Buckingham Palace announced in October 2025 that he will have to leave the house, which is expected to happen in early 2026. The property is owned by the Crown Estate, and decisions about its future use will ultimately rest with King Charles and his advisors. Given the property's historical significance and the late Queen Elizabeth II's deep connection to it, any decision about its future will be carefully considered. Some have speculated that it might be offered to another member of the royal family, possibly the Prince and Princess of Wales, though they have recently settled into Adelaide Cottage and have plans to move to Forest Lodge. Others have suggested that the property might be open to the public, allowing visitors to experience the home where the young Princess Elizabeth spent so much of her childhood. This would generate revenue for the Crown Estate while preserving the property's historical legacy. The personal toll. Beyond the public drama and political implications, the human cost of this scandal is significant. Andrew and Ferguson's two daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, have watched their father's reputation crumble and their childhood home become the subject of international controversy. Both princesses have maintained low profiles regarding the scandal, presumably to protect their own families and careers. For Andrew himself, the transformation from Prince to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor represents a complete loss of identity. Born into royalty and raised with all the privileges and expectations that entails, he must now navigate life as a private citizen under the shadow of scandal. At 66 years old, with no independent source of income and his reputation in tatters, the future looks bleak. Sarah Ferguson faces her own challenges. At 66, she must establish a truly independent life for perhaps the first time in decades. While she has maintained various business ventures and continues her charitable work, the loss of the security and social position that came with her association with Royal Lodge and Andrew will be significant. The final word. Buckingham Palace's statement concluded, "Their Majesties wish to make clear that their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of any and all forms of mistreatments." The royal family's stance to the crisis has significantly changed with this acknowledgement of the victims. For years, the public relations crisis and Andrew's protection appeared to be the main priorities. Under King Charles's direction, accountability and acknowledging the sorrow of those who were injured have become more important. Justice for the victims is an essential, if delayed, acknowledgement of what ought to have been the main priority. A lengthy and complex chapter in the history of the British monarchy comes to an end with Andrew's eviction from Royal Lodge and his and Sarah Ferguson's effective exile from royal life. It shows that even princes are subject to accountability and that the institution's continued existence rests on its capacity to adjust to contemporary standards of fairness and openness. Andrew is getting ready to depart the mansion that has served as his home for more than 20 years as he packs his stuff. One thing is evident as Sarah Ferguson considers her future as an independent woman. Finally, the fallout from their affiliation with Jeffrey Epstein has caught up with them. The gilded cage of royal privilege has been opened, and they are being banished into a very public and long-lasting exile, rather than into freedom. Once a representation of royal family life and continuity, the tale of Royal Lodge has evolved into a warning about the perils of putting status above morals, preserving relationships that ought to have been broken long ago, and safeguarding one's reputation over the truth. Although many see King Charles's bold decision as coming years too late, it is a necessary reckoning for a monarchy attempting to endure in the 21st century. For the people who live at Royal Lodge, the corgis that were once owned by Queen Elizabeth II, the employees who have taken care of the property, and the memories that are ingrained in each room, there will be change. And for Sarah Ferguson, the deceased Duchess, and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the decisions they took and the company they maintained have left the future unclear, diminished, and eternally darkened. That's it, family. It's your time to share your thoughts now. Tell us what you think by leaving a comment. Is Prince Andrew and his wife receiving what they deserve, or is King Charles going too far and forcing them to leave the royal estates? Are they being handled unfairly, or did their behavior call for such repercussions? We would like to know what you think about this royal drama. For more juicy royal news and updates, remember to like and subscribe.